Hey everybody, we are Francis, Martin, and Robert, and this is Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Get ready, we're about to live in your head rent-free.
Beware the beast man, for he is the devil's pawn. Alone among God's primates, he kills for sport, or lust, or greed. Yea, he will murder his brother to possess his brother's land. Let him not breed in great numbers, for he will make a desert of his home and yours. Shun him. Drive him back into his jungle lair, for he is the harbinger of death. Welcome to Snakes and Otters, episode 61.
I'm Martin.
I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. You might know that quotation. It should be blazoned in most everybody's mind from the very end of the awesome movie, Planet of the Apes. That's what we're about this time. We're going to talk about the cultural phenomenon of the Planet of the Apes franchise. More than just the first movie, more than just the movie series, more than there's a whole bunch of stuff from just a period of 5 or 6 years, Planet of the Apes was on fire. It was everywhere. There were 5 major motion pictures. There was a TV series, an animated TV series. There were an amazing toy line, which I'm sure we'll get into, comic books and magazines and novels, and apes were everywhere. Halloween costumes, my goodness, they were all over the place. I never had one. I don't know about you guys if you ever got one. But anything that was Planet of the Apes, I wanted it, and I wanted it bad. I wanted the entire Mego toy collection. I never got any of it, which is a big bummer for me. Yes, we still have our regrets even 50-some-odd years later, I suppose. But Planet of the Apes is fun. It was also amazingly poignant, as that quotation should kind of point out. This is not just your B movie. This is not just folks dressing up in ape suits and running around being silly. This is one of the most poignant, there's that word again, reflections of what does it mean to be human. And that's, I think, one of the reasons that the series got such legs under it. Those first 4 pictures of the motion picture series, we were talking about this in the show prep, I think were pretty darned outstanding. They really, really were. And we'll talk a little bit about our favorites, the good parts, the bad points. The 5th one was, as Martin reminded us, they had no money. It was basically, we'll give you enough money to make one more, but only so much. And it was just kind of, okay, drifted away. But then it was revived back in the 2000s and made yet another fantastic movie series that actually is intended to be a direct sequel. I don't know if you guys realize that. They literally, in the first movie, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, there is a magazine article that talks about Taylor and his ship disappearing. This is basically... Yeah, it was very subtle. It was very brief. It was intended to. That movie is intended to be. Those 3 movies from the 2000s are intended to be.
Well,
the prime timeline.
There's 4. There's the one in 2000-ish, 2001.
Oh, that's right.
Then there are the 3 later, so there are 4 movies total.
I'm sorry, but I kind of blanked out on that Tim Burton one. I wasn't
well, that's
even counting
that
one.
Chuck in it. Come on.
Well, I know. I had actually going to gloss over that one. I was going to go Monty Python, skip a bit, brother, and go on because it was kind of stinky in many ways, which is a shame because it had a heck of a director and a heck of a cast and a heck of a budget. But we'll talk about that too. Guys, what are your all's thoughts about it? You have some initial thoughts before we kind of get into what happened and when?
Yeah, I think you make a great point about the appeal, at least of the first movie series, in that it was way more than just a kind of a science fiction fantasy thing, drive-in type, Monkey Planet kind of thing. And I think a lot of that credit goes to 2 people, the producer, Arthur Jacobs,
yes,
and Rod Serling, who wrote the screenplay to the first film. Now, it was rewritten a little bit, but Serling's the guy who injected the themes about the Cold War and a lot of what the part that I think Chuck Heston really dug into was the some apes are more equal than others storyline.
Right.
You know, where
social commentary.
That social commentary where it became plain that while the apes professed that they were all equal, you know, Chuck kind of pointed out, well, you're no better than us. You're full of shit too, because the chimps were in the middle.
Yeah.
You know, and the orangutans were the honchos and looked down on all the chimps, and they both looked down on all the gorillas. Yeah. So there was a class structure in that society too.
I think the chimps were on the bottom because they had no power at all. The gorillas had the military power.
Yeah, there's truth to that. That becomes especially evident in the second picture when James Gregory comes in as the character of Ursus, and you see the military power just kind of explode outwards. And Zira and Cornelius, who was not played by Roddy McDowall in that one picture, by the way, he was off doing a play, he said, and they had another British actor play him. But he sounds a lot like him. If you don't look at the credits, you don't really know that. But it's they were caught in the middle. They are in many respects, they're the protagonists of the story. Co-protagonists, I suppose, in the first two pictures, but of course in the third picture, they have the show to themselves.
Yeah, they're the central figures of the third film, which I really did like the third one. But it's another one of those where the budget's a little limited, so let's just have 3 apes.
Well, that's
let's
true.
Get rid of one of them real quick.
That's Salminio, actually. Yes. Who was in there just a very brief period of time. But it was a brilliant way. You got to give. You're right. Giving Jacobs credit for being able to keep this series alive, not just as a moneymaker. Yes, it was that, but if he wasn't good at what he did, from 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 would have all stunk. But he had some really great writers on those 2 and 3 and 4 to reinvent it and keep it fresh. And of course, eventually it runs out, as we can see when looking at that 5th movie. But this is some serious biting social commentary about humanity, and to be honest, that gets turned up throughout, especially that 3rd and 4th movie, because when the apes are in human society, that 3rd movie, you cannot help. I mean, I watched it when my kids were younger, and they absolutely bawled. I think I let them watch it too early because the ending is so dark. These kind and compassionate and empathetic, peaceful creatures who have come to live with us, we cannot tolerate their existence. There's a Christ image for you, by the way. And they are killed because they cannot be tolerated. And not only are they killed, but their infant child is killed. So everyone believes, and it's unbelievably awful. And it's a biting, acerbic bite to it, saying just how evil we humans can be. The message is so very clear in that movie, and many people say that 3rd movie is the best of all of them. I don't know if I can necessarily say that, but it certainly is really good.
Number one. Number one is
it's correct. It's hard to top that first one.
It's a terrific fantasy adventure, along with this great social commentary piece.
Well, the allegory
that works so well.
Yeah, allegory is done very well here. It's not in your face. It's actually, because if you think about it, everybody should realize when you hear them first speaking English, the game should be up, but it doesn't.
And they ignore all of that. They ignore that in every movie. I mean, you can't really use that as a bellwether.
Exactly, but you have to admit that at the very end of that first movie, it is still an iconic moment for all the right reasons, because you don't really know. They really do it well. That you don't really know that this is Earth until the very last. And then, of course, everything comes home. That's that classic reveal. And I'm sorry if we're spoiling it for you. If you haven't seen the damn movie yet, shame on you. Where have you been living on a rock? Because it's one of the most iconic moments in cinema history ever. Yeah. And it still gives me chills, even to watch it years later. And part of it's Heston's performance, but it's the writing, and that's Rod Serling for you.
Rod Serling,
he would be master of that sort of thing.
Yeah. So really landmark stuff. And again, I think it's thanks to Jacobs and Serling and some to Chuck too.
Well, yeah, because the movie would have never
Chuck's
been made.
Pull got it made.
That's correct. It was a rather obscure novel by Peter Boole that was optioned around Hollywood around this time, and nobody wanted to touch it because, one thing, who wants to see talking apes? That was kind of how it went out. And Chuck was
you got to remember, this is also at the very end of what is a very campy period in entertainment with the Batman show,
right? Yeah.
With Lost in Space. We've seen, and even before that, Irwin Allen did a lot to try and kill this unintentionally. Rubber-suited guys playing monsters in his shows, and I'm sure this came off as more of the same.
That's what it was expected to be. Well, it was kind of like Forbidden Planet and all that stuff. It was going back to those 50 serials too. That was science fiction, and it's no accident that Rod Serling is part of this, because he was one of the few science fiction creators that did it seriously and well with the Twilight Zone. Of course, this was quite a few years before that, and it was anthology too. It was very different. But Star Trek and Planet of the Apes both came on the scene right around the same time, doing serious science fiction, in many respects against all odds. Both of them almost didn't get made because the powers that be in Hollywood said science fiction is for dummies. It's for kids. You can't do serious science fiction. And both of them created franchises that still endure today because they did it well. And we've talked about this a lot. One of the reasons that science fiction, when it's done well, is very good, is because it illuminates the human condition in ways that other mediums and other genres don't do as well. It allows you to go, and this was a core of Roddenberry, this is what he said, I can tell these stories that the censors will be just clueless about, and yet we can talk about big issues. Planet of the Apes is the same thing. In fact, yeah, go ahead, Robert.
No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that one of the reasons for the rise of serious science fiction in the 70s, 80s, and beyond started here in the late 60s, because all of a sudden people say, what? Not only is it good, it made oodles of money too? Really? And then that's why Lucas could come along later, and the pump was primed in many ways. There is such a thing as serious science fiction, and this really helped, and it showed that there's a hunger for good stories in this medium. And I do believe that you can draw that straight line through that. Robert?
Well, I don't remember what I was going to say. If you want to take a pause and take 10 or 1,200 breaths there, because you've been incredibly voluminous. I was worried you were going to pass out with the amount of air that was coming out of you there.
I am stunned, sir. I didn't. Maybe I should take a drink of bourbon. Would that help?
Yeah, there you go.
Yes, bourbon pause.
Just a pause to catch your breath.
Well, I am
there.
You guys know me. You know me probably better than anybody else on the planet. And when I am passionate about something, I talk. And this is definitely one of those things that I like a lot. I stayed up very late in the mid-'70s when they would show these movies on late night, Saturday nights here locally. Probably 76, 77. That's the only way you could see them. There's no such thing as VCRs. There's no such thing as DVDs or any way to see these movies. Somebody's got to show them. And I saw the first two when they were broadcast on CBS, Friday night movies. And I knew there were more, and I wanted to see them. And I stayed up late. I mean, this was like, they're over at like 2 o'clock in the morning. And I'm, 10? My parents weren't real happy, but they were long asleep anyway, and I was quiet, so I got away with it, because they did it 1 week for practice. But I was enthralled. Still am, even today. I can turn these movies on and watch them and not be bored.
So what bourbon did you just pour yourself, sir?
Now, we talked about this in the show prep a little bit. I have gone out and purchased a bottle of the Old Tub, unfiltered, bottled in bond. Robert, that's a tribute to you, sir. Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey, distilled and bottled by James Beam Distilling Company here in Claremont, Kentucky. The Old Tub. It was a very old brand, as we've discussed in another episode, and it had recently come back, and I ran into it recently. I said, well, Robert said this is good, so I'm going to try it. So here we are.
Yep.
So does it live up to the Basil Hayden, or 100 proof Basil Hayden, as it was described to me?
I just took my first sip. Whoa, yeah, Daddy. Yes, I would say so. It's very smooth. It's very bite. It's got that bite to it. It's unfiltered, it says here, which I'm not sure, how that affects things. It does seem to have.
It probably means
a good bite.
That you're going to get bits of char and oak in the bottling process. I imagine it'll be relatively small, but I imagine that's possible.
Not run through the charcoal.
Mm-hmm. I don't, it has nothing in it that you can see, and the taste of it is excellent. It's smooth, but it's got that bite to it. It's and I'm very happy with it. I can't wait to share it with you guys.
And I have also procured a bottle, so we will be ready to share next time we are gathered. We should have it covered.
You're not drinking that, are you?
No, I have not opened my bottle. I am working on finishing off the larceny.
Still.
Yes.
Well, because we're not there to help you.
People are going to think that this bottle of larceny you're drinking is a 5-gallon jug. You've been drinking it for so long.
I'm almost to the bottom of it. Almost. There's about that much left.
Well, I've just poured myself the last of my regular Woodford Reserve. This is the last bit of that one bottle.
All right. So, there's one film in the series that is particularly dark. Yes, the third one has a really dark ending, but the fourth one is a very dark film. The screenplay is modeled, the plot is modeled after the 1966 Watts riots, and it's a very dystopian, authoritarian future in which the apes are enslaved as menial labor, and police torture is commonplace against both the apes and other humans. Mm-hmm. And that's the fourth film, Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. And we were just discussing a little bit when we were doing our show prep that there's actually two endings to this film. Mm-hmm. One is quite dark, in which basically all the humans who lose the battle in the middle of Los Angeles are killed by the apes. But that tested so poorly that 20th Century Fox hurriedly reshot a little bit of a new ending, and the humans were spared, and Caesar, the son of Cornelius, makes a long speech about, we'll try to forgive you. It's time we have to live together, that kind of thing.
Right.
So I find that one, again, it's kind of a drive-in fair type thing for the early 70s, 1972, but it's still pretty gutsy stuff. With the social commentary.
To talk about the issue of slavery so overtly and show it, my goodness, this is and you're right, it is evil on evil on evil, and it's kind of like the entire world has gone mad, and there are really I think 3 sympathetic characters in there. There's Caesar himself, there's Armando by the great Ricardo Montalban, and no, I'm not talking about each Corinthian leather or anything like that, but he's always cool. And the guy whose name I cannot recall who played McDonald, yes, which was very deliberate. He's African American. They wanted him to be one of the heroes in there. They say, yes, because they recognize this is a very uncomfortable subject, and it's a very, in 1972, this is dancing on the edge, big time, to actually make this movie. And if you get a chance to see that original version, it was released a few years ago. It is actually a better movie. It really does bring home what isn't supposed to happen. It's more realistic. But at the time it came out, children would come see these movies all the time. It would have been a hard R. There was lots of blood, and the kiddies would have come away not just crying, but they would have been hysterical to watch that happen. They would have been having nightmares.
And it was an open slave rebellion.
It is
depiction.
with
So,
and with
very
all
strong.
that goes with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was still a very good movie. It really was. It was. It might be my favorite of all those, only because it was so daring. I think we talked. Arthur P. Jacobs could have just done the one and said, "Oh, isn't this nice?" and maybe done the second sequel that Charlton Heston had to be talked into just having a cameo in, and that should have ended it. In fact, Heston was delighted when at the end of the second movie they blow up the world. He says, "Well, good. They don't have to ask me to come back again." And it was a great. The two together would have been fine, but they made a lot of money, and Jacobs brought in some good screenwriters and totally remade it.
Yeah.
And I was talking about at a TV Guide article around that same time called "How Do You Milk an Ape?" And that's kind of when all of a sudden people realize, oh, people will buy anything that's Planet of the Apes now. So they had to license the toys and the magazines and the book and records, for kids. I mean, it was a big kid thing, although it wasn't really
comic book series and
comic book
animated series.
A TV series which was kind of sucky. I'm sorry, I didn't like it all that well. I mean, I tried to watch it, but it's still hard to watch. The animated series was actually much better. It was only like 12 episodes, one season, but it was actually really pretty good.
So, Robert, which one do you find the most interesting?
Well, I like the first one best for a lot of reasons. One, I think it's of the first two, it's definitely the most cohesive story.
Yeah.
Because second jumps around a little too much to be a really good cohesive story. It doesn't flow as well. And plus, you've got Charlton Heston as the hero for the entirety of the movie, not just a little bit. And I still want to know where he got the clothes in the second movie. But that's all right. And it's really hard to beat those two iconic scenes. The first is, take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty apes. Everybody knows that line because that too has been lampooned hundreds of times in media, as well as the ending when the Statue of Liberty shows up and he's pounding the sand and wailing about how they blew it up. When I was a kid, I thought he meant the statue, but because it looks like it's buried in the sand, melted, like it's been destroyed, but it's just the changing landscape. He was talking about the entire planet. But as far as the entertainment value, when you're a kid, you look at these differently. I really liked probably the third and the fifth better from that perspective, because from the third, there's just a lot of fun moments in that when they are becoming the toast of the town, so to speak.
Yeah.
Plus, not to mention, one of the TV anchors is from Detroit. So as you're watching, Bill. Bill Bonds. Bill Bonds. And when you're watching that, that's kind of cool that you see that. Honestly, I don't think the fifth one's that bad. I think that's a good attempt to end to come full circle. And it's kind of goofy in places, but it is still a good vehicle for the topic of race relations. Mm-hmm. Probably better because it is. Granted, it's a subplot, but that subplot of how the humans are treated and corralled and what have you, that is kind of and it's meant to be the reverse of what goes on in the fourth film, but it is because it's a little bit less. I don't want to say sophisticated in storytelling, but the setting is different because they're all out in the woods because this is post-nuclear war. Whereas the other one is pre. And that's another thing. In the fourth movie, as great as that one is, because I did love that one as well. I loved all of them. In reality, the army comes in and puts that down. Every one of those apes gets slaughtered because that just happens in one city.
I know, it's kind of amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's why they had to create the whole nuclear thing for that fifth movie. Otherwise,
that's part of the original story, though.
Yeah.
So, they were able to use that as the vehicle to get to that, but that's why I said they were bringing it full circle. But in reality, nobody that was part of that uprising survived. Not at all.
Well, they're not very familiar with tactics or anything, so
right.
It should have been easy to flank them and Caesar should have had limited knowledge of military tactics. He lived in a circus.
Those that had weapons that could have fought them were just as surprised as anybody else, and there weren't enough of them because they were outnumbered. So that's all fine. You have to suspend your disbelief. But I just have a hard time beating the Charlton Heston original, partially because it's Chuck.
Yeah.
But partially because it is the best, purest form of the allegory they are playing with.
Yeah. You brought up something pretty interesting, too. Again, Chuck deserves a lot of credit, not just for getting it made, but his characterization of Taylor and the way Taylor is written, I always found very interesting, too. It could have been a very one-dimensional character, and you lose some of him when it becomes, the action really starts with the apes. You kind of forget the setup, but I really like the initial part right after the crash landing, and the 3 astronauts are still alive, and they're walking through the Forbidden Zone. They don't know it's the Forbidden Zone, but they're on the desert and searching for life, and it becomes a discussion between the 3 of them about why did they come? Why are they on this mission? And Landon and Dodge have their own reasons, but Taylor's reason is so chilling that he's basically a misfit.
Yeah, a nihilist.
A nihilist, and he's there has to be something better than man out there. That's why I came on this trip.
Right.
We can't be all there is to the world. We suck.
Which of course is the whole point of the movie.
Too. Yeah. So he gets his answer.
Yeah.
So it's a really
you were
neat,
right. We suck.
Yeah, a really neat, chilling portrayal, and Serling, the writing and the development of the character is deeper in that film than really in any of the others. Yeah,
Taylor's character, he recaptures his humanity by the end, and that's something that at the beginning of the film, he's incredibly negative. He doesn't give a damn about anybody. He only mildly laments the death of Stewart, the only female in the crew. She's given very short shrift because her pod was damaged somehow. How it gets damaged, it's cracked, whatever. But I think he regains his humanity at the end. He wants to live. He wants to be with Nova and go off and explore this new world. And I think that's a little bit of redemption for him. Which is why I think at the end of the second movie, when he sets off the bomb, is a little against the character growth that he had in the first movie.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was definitely a hard turn away from that. Shouldn't have been that. And part of that is Heston kind of insisting, I don't want to do this again, and you got to do this in such a way where you can't bring me back. So I think that's one of the reasons it's kind of shoehorned in there.
Yeah.
And you're right, it's very disjointed because Heston insisted, I'll be in at the beginning, and you got to get me back at the end, but that's all I'll do. And then you bring in James Franciscus, and he was kind of there, and you go, why isn't Taylor doing this? Well, it should have been, but it was. Yeah. It's got all sorts of weird constructions because of that.
Yeah, that was kind of back before the idea of, the big time sequel and playing the same character over and over again and having your own franchise. I mean, really, the only other thing that's out there like that is what, Bond?
Bond, yeah.
I mean,
and by this time, Sean Connery had a terrible experience with it, and I'm sure Heston probably knew that. Is that I don't want to get stuck into this, playing this thing over and over again. And he didn't have to. I mean, he could choose what he wanted to do at that point.
Yeah.
One of the other things I find interesting about the original movies is I don't know that the changing of the setting and the way the last 3 movies go is a factor of budget so much as it is the turn in filmmaking at the time. Because in '68 we were still allowed some fantasy in our movies. there is almost a hard turn right in 1970.
Yep.
And from that point forward, everything is set in the modern day. There are very few fantasy or science fiction of any kind, or even westerns, anything like that is done. Those are the rare exception. Even stars that were known for those are now doing cop movies.
Yeah.
John Wayne is a cop. Oh my God! Whoever would have thought that would have happened?
Yeah, even the epic films, the historical epic is pretty much done. Cleopatra and some others kind of ruined that.
Well, television changed too, and we've talked about this a lot when we did our cop show episode. That everything went realism. It's all about modern and relevant. That's why you have All in the Family and Maude and Rhoda.
Right, and that's why
Mary Tyler Moore was better.
Yeah, and I think that's why the racial and slavery aspects are more played up in the third, fourth, and fifth movies, because those are 71, 72, and 73.
Yeah.
When you think about the campus unrest that was going on, a lot of that's going to play to that crowd, and just the strife that was going on seemed to demand those issues be dealt with. And that can go either way, because that could go, we don't want to have to deal with that, we want our fantasy. But because we just came out of a big epic and fantasy-oriented period of filmmaking, because we had it all with the big epics starting in the 50s, and then when you had Technicolor for all of the stuff in the late 50s and 60s, and all these big things going on, and then finally they just get tired of it. But I think that the third, fourth, and fifth are less a reflection of money. I mean, I'm sure that's part of it, but more so a reflection of what does this mean to our modern times? How does this, how do we deal with these issues as Americans in the 20th century?
Yeah, because you're turning off the news, which is only pretty much about Vietnam or the Manson murders or something else horrible.
Or Watergate.
Or coming up on Watergate,
Yeah.
And you're turning that off to go, okay, well, let's go to the drive-in tonight and watch Planet of the Apes then. So
then you get a mix of it, because there's still that fantasy element, even if it's only minor.
Yeah.
And it's one of the great things about science fiction. Yes, these are all science fiction because there is time travel and all that makes it science fiction. But to me, science fiction is not really a genre unto itself, because to me it's the vehicle for all of the other genres. Just as any genre that is setting based, the Western is a vehicle for all of the other genres, because it's just the setting. And you can do you can do a crime, you can do a thriller, you can do romance, you can do science fiction in a Western, you can do Western in a science fiction. Because you had How the West Was Won was science fiction in a Western setting, with Will Smith and Kevin Kline and
the Wild Wild West.
Yeah, Wild Wild West. Yeah, sorry. And Kenneth Branagh, and then you've got Firefly, Serenity.
I was hoping you'd mention
the movie. That's westerns in a science fiction setting.
Yeah,
and that's why science fiction is great, because it can, in many ways. Now, sometimes it's over. Hit you right smack in the face. There's no subtlety.
Yeah,
and I don't like that kind. But when you use westerns or science fiction, especially because it's easier to do it, I think, because of that fantastical element, it's easier to make social commentary in those settings, because it's more. It can be more subtle. It doesn't have to be in your face.
Yeah, you can provide a lens, which in the outer ring is a lot of fun, but underneath that lens, when you look really hard, it's a morality tale. It's a tale of someone like Taylor, where he says, "I'm a seeker too." He's seeking justice. He's seeking humanity, and so that's the lens. That's what you're supposed to eventually see underneath the ape makeup.
Right, and that's Zira and Cornelius, the only two true humans. When you, in the sense of Taylor's looking for something better than man. What he's looking for is man at his best. because obviously that's the only way we can look at that. Protozoan slime is kind of hard for us to relate to, so it's man at his best is what you're looking for. And oddly enough, he finds it in Zira and Cornelius, two of the apes, the chimps. He doesn't find it anywhere. He finds it a little bit in Nova, but she's such a blank slate. She's a tabula rasa. She is not something that she represents. I guess you could say the potential of humanity. Whereas Zira and Cornelius, they show the best traits of humanity.
Well, there's Robert the Hammer.
Absolutely.
Putting it down.
So,
Tabula rasa, even using some Latin for us.
That's right. Yeah, I'm only chuckling because since we're doing this on a video call, I can see Martin in the background pantomiming the hammering of stuff. It's hard to keep a straight face and talk while I'm watching that, but that's what makes this a great science fiction as well as a great moral tale, because the vehicle is used so well, and I think it's done best in the first movie. That's one of the reasons why I like the first movie best.
I would agree. I go back and forth myself depending on the day on which ones it is. One thing we haven't talked about much though are those later movies. I know we'll skip over Tim Burton's a little bit unless you want to talk about it.
I think you have to talk about it if for no other reason than you've got Chuck in it.
That's right. Was it his last role? It was almost. It was.
I think it was.
I think it was. Yeah.
He was uncredited, I believe. He played the father to was it Tim Roth? I think.
Tim Roth. That's correct. That's right. Yeah.
Who couldn't stand him as a person, oddly enough. But it had some great acting. Helena Bonham Carter was the female ape in that. She was phenomenal, I thought.
Yeah.
She's a phenomenal actress, anyways.
Yeah.
But for someone like her to be able to come in and do something like that just shows how good she truly is. The story was goofy. The ending was goofy. They tried to do their own version on the Statue of Liberty, and it wasn't that great. Although, honestly, I thought that as a series, that would have made a great second movie if they picked it up right there. We're back in what should be modern times, and instead of people, they're all apes. The Lincoln Monument is an ape.
Right. And that's actually the way the book ends, Peter Boole's. It was actually kind of closer to his in many respects, not the science fiction aspect, but that turnabout. He tries to make it back and finds out they're all apes.
It's been a long time since I read that. I read that as a kid because I was all into this as well. I didn't get a whole lot of the toys, although like you, Francis, I wanted them. Yep. I stayed up. I didn't have to stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning. But I very vividly remember watching them when we lived in a city called Taylor in Michigan. Oddly enough, and they would be on TV regularly on one of the channels. I don't remember if it was ABC or CBS. And this would have been before '75, so they were hitting reruns on television pretty quickly. And that's probably partially because that's a good way to promo the movies as they come out.
Yeah.
And of course, into the later '70s too. Yeah. I liked the TV show. I enjoyed it because I couldn't get enough of any of it.
Well, I was the same way. Yeah, it was really so. Any apes is good apes. That's kind of the way it was to me. Looking back on it, it was because I wanted more ape stuff, and this was the only way you could get it at that time. I really loved the animated series. I thought it was one of the very best, well done stuff. It even had some pieces from the movies dropped into it. The character Brent makes an appearance. Nova's in it, and of course Zira and Cornelius, Dr. Zaius.
Yeah, and the settings are a lot different. They've got technology. There are cars, for instance. So it's a different setting than the movies, but it stands on its own pretty well. The animation is crude, but it's fun. It really is.
Well, yeah, it was really. I enjoyed it. It's like I say, like you, I've got the DVDs too, and I do pull them out every once in a while because it was the story, like the Star Trek animated series from around that same time. The stories were excellent. These were not written for small children. These were serious science fiction stuff in an animated format. The stories were excellent most of the time. Not always, but most of the time.
I think I've seen 2 of the last 3 movies, and I hear there may be a 4th in the works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I have not seen the final one.
Yeah, they are really, really good. They were intended to be. I remember
I enjoyed the first one quite a bit.
Yeah, Rise of the Planet of the Apes was really good. It sets things up excellently well. It's a hard sci-fi series, though, much more so than otherwise. But I'll give Matt Reeves a lot of credit as the driving force behind this. He wrote these things very, very, very well. And it was intended as a trilogy. It was always intended to end where it ended. You cannot, I mean, Andy Serkis doing motion capture, come on, he's the king of such things. And he did a fantastic job in all three of those movies. It's a great dystopian future of how in the world could apes take our place. Well, they lay it out very, very clearly. It's a biological plague that we released on our own. I mean, it's
oddly enough, they used the 12 Monkeys plot twist with the plague, because you're right. That's really the only way that makes sense. Because anything that's going to kill off man is going to kill off the apes as well.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So it really is a fantastic. I enjoyed it well. I'm not a huge Woody Harrelson fan, but I thought in that last movie he absolutely freaking nailed it. He was just really, really good.
I have grown fond of his stuff more and more.
I have too.
That's
correct.
You know, he was great in Zombieland, for instance. Great comedic role. Love that movie. It's hilarious. In Doc Hollywood from many moons ago with Michael J. Fox, he plays another hilarious comedic role. He's got a lot more depth and breadth to his ability.
He did. He actually did, not to go off on a tangent, he did a live version of remaking some All in the Family scripts with Norman Lear. They did. Marissa Tomei with him, believe it or not. He played Archie, and Marissa Tomei played Edith, and it was in front of a live audience. They actually recorded same scripts they used years ago. Fascinating stuff, because you can see he's a great actor. And I'll say that freely. He's of the Cheers alumni. Surprisingly enough, considering he was nobody when he came into that series, he's probably the biggest star that came out of there. That's saying a lot, because Kirstie Alley, Ted Danson, and Ray Perlman, and Danny DeVito. Actually, Danny DeVito wasn't in that, was he?
Well, no.
No, sorry. I put the two together. They're divorced now. I probably shouldn't do that anymore. But
Ted Danson became a pretty big deal. He had a time when he was pretty much off the radar, but that's picked up in recent years.
Oh yeah, he's done a lot. I mean, they're all great. They're all great. But that Matt Reeves trilogy.
Oh, of course, Kelsey Grammer.
Oh well, of course, absolutely. Yeah, he's my guy. He's my guy. I love Kelsey Grammer. I think he's in fact, I'm not wearing it tonight, gentlemen, but I usually have a Frasier T-shirt that I wear so often because he's one of my heroes. Hello, Seattle. I'm listening. But that's another episode. We should perhaps do a Frasier episode. We've not done one of those. That would probably be a fun episode.
Hello, Snakes and Otters. I'm listening.
That's right. That's exactly right. Anything else, guys? Before we wrap this bad boy up, I mean, a lot of this is nostalgia. I'll freely recognize that, but it's got legs too, as we've discussed.
Yeah.
It really is, and that new trilogy, I think, brought it home to a new generation that knew the iconic moments, knew that there was a history there, but didn't live it. But they have now. I really hope that they do a fourth movie on that. I think there's lots more that they could do very, very well with that. Final thoughts, guys?
It's just funny to think of a film franchise from 1968 to 1973 as being still somewhat relevant in its message. And it does a better job with that message than, say, I don't know, Let That Be Your Last Battlefield.
You're trying to get a rise out of Robert on that one.
No rise, because I'm in total agreement.
That's right. I was going to say, yes, trying to get a commentary there on that.
There's a difference between having nearly 10 hours of movies to play with this, or just even the first movie, 2 hours-ish, 90 minutes to 2 hours to play with this, versus 51 minutes in an original series Star Trek episode. Which is just astounding when you think about it, because today you're lucky if you get 42 minutes out of an hour show.
That's right. That's why they've had to cut the heck out of it if you show it in reruns.
Ads are literally twice as long as they were 50 years ago. And they often did 25 to 30 episodes in a season. There was no hard cutoff like there is now.
Yeah, 22 episodes.
You're lucky if you get more than 10 episodes out of some shows in a particular year. 10.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
But to me, the biggest thing that about this is that it's fun. It doesn't last unless it's fun. That's the primary.
Well said, sir. That's very well put.
Mm-hmm.
And even though as dark as 3, 4, and 5 get in the original, that's Return, Conquest, and Battle for Planet of the Apes. There are still fun moments. There's times when you recognize humanity in what's going on. We can see ourselves in all of those situations, which to me is a mark of good science fiction when you can see yourself in what is essentially the alien characters. It's a little bit easier with apes because they come from Earth and they're a little bit easier to identify with. There was probably a little bit of unintended, maybe, I don't know. Some of the apes, some of the gorillas, seem to have some negative racial overtones in themselves. From the way they were portrayed, they seem to come across as almost, I don't say Black Panther kind of elements, but they seem to be the just to put it in modern times, the black boogeyman of the series. In that one movie, the 5th movie specifically.
Right. Yeah. Claude Akins, I think, was.
Claude Akins. Oddly enough, white guy.
Yeah.
But matter of fact, probably most of them were white people because that's mostly what got acting jobs back then.
Unfortunately, you're right. I mean, McDonald and his brother in the 4th and 5th movie were deliberately intended to be African Americans because they wanted to blunt that racial. I mean, they at least had that understanding that this could be very racist if it's done poorly, and we want to make sure that we head that off. And the actors that they chose, and I'm sorry I do not have their names, they actually pulled it off very, very well because they are 2 of the heroes.
Here.
I was going to say, Martin's already got this looked up, yeah.
Harry Rhodes plays MacDonald in
Conquest.
In Conquest.
Yeah, fantastic portrayal.
Austin Stoker played MacDonald, the brother, in Battle.
Right.
And I want to give one other shout-out to somebody who was instrumental in these films, and that is, in these original films, that's Paul Dean or Dane, I'm not sure the pronunciation of his name.
Oh, Dane, yes, that's right.
He was the screenwriter who took over, starting with the second film, and did the screenwriting for Escape and Conquest, and submitted a draft for Battle, but wasn't able to see it through.
Right. Yeah. See, and he deserves a lot of credit because the really great movies that 3 and 4 were. That's him.
It's unusual to get the same screenwriter on that many movies in a series. Even George Lucas did not write all of the Star Wars films.
Yes.
Yeah.
Certainly not direct. But yeah, like I said, they're fun. That's why they last. Technically, they may be outpaced and overshadowed by the more recent movies, but I still think that first one holds up really, and the second one as well because it's essentially the same settings. As a kid, the thing about the second one that fascinated me was all the underground stuff. I loved seeing the ruins of the human world.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I thought that was awesome.
Well, it made sense because if you're going to have the big reveal at the end of the first one, then you should explore what that means in the second one, which they did, and they did that very, very well. They kind of that's one of the reasons I like the second one so much too, is it pays forward what you had. It's a true sequel, which it's not just another story set in the same world. I kind of like that continuity. They're very linked in many ways.
Yep.
So guys, I have one other little shout out. 2 very large musical figures passed away recently, and I wanted to raise a glass to both. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing the name correctly, but Ennio
Charlie
Morricone.
Daniels. It's real easy.
He's the second one, but the first one is
Italian
composer, we talked about spaghetti westerns, and he wrote the music in a bunch of them. And he passed away, I think he was 91, something like that. But very famously wrote Ecstasy of Gold, the instrumental song that plays during the big three-way gunfight in The Good and the Bad and the Ugly.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, Robert, you mentioned Charlie Daniels, a great patriot and great performer.
Mm-hmm.
Recently passed away of a stroke at age 83. So.
Oh yes, he was an amazing. We all remember how he came to prominence in the late 70s, and he's stayed with it ever since that. I actually got to see him perform not that many years ago, and he was in his late 70s, mid 70s, and he was just as fired up as he ever was. He wonderful guy.
Played
if you don't like Devil Went Down to Georgia, you're just not human.
Amen to that.
Yeah,
well,
that's a
Uneasy
great
Rider.
song.
Uneasy Rider is one of my favorite songs.
I love Uneasy Rider.
That's one that we could quote easily. I just reached out, kicked old Green Tea right in the knees. That's right. We could sing the song probably, but we're not going to do that.
Yeah. I tucked my hair up under my hat and told the bartender that I had a flat. Would he be kind enough to give me change for a one?
Yeah. Unfortunately, as I believe as Liza Minnelli said when she was asked to sing Over the Rainbow, it's been sung, is what she said. That's kind of what I would say with Charlie Daniels in that song. It's been sung. He did it. There's no way that any of us could ever hope to do that. Well, we'll have to.
Certainly not us, anyways.
Well, I suppose that's very true. But we can raise a glass to both of these gentlemen. May they rest in peace, and may their legends live long.
And thanks for what you gave us. Thanks for the great entertainment.
Amen to that.
So, Francis, what's up next?
We got a Hoopajube, boys. It seems like it's been a while. The last one was the interview episode we did with our friend the Emperor. This one here, we're going to be as weird and as changing around and something. I think, Robert, you're the one that came up with this idea.
Yes. I got it from people at work. An argument started over this very thing.
All right, we're going to settle that argument.
We're going to settle the argument of, is cereal a soup?
Yes.
As well as other funny, weird food facts. We think you're going to have a blast with this. Martin's going to captain this. He's already got some ideas, so he tells us. We're just going to have fun like we always do with our Hoopajube episode.
So before we sign off, since you mentioned the last Hoopajube was our interview episode with Marcus Aurelius, he is, as listeners know, because it's been a couple of months since that one aired, and I think we mentioned it a few episodes ago, he went in for a liver transplant, ended up being a huge ordeal, ended up with 2 transplants out of 3 livers, because the second one was botched, getting the liver to them. Finally has been moved to a rehab hospital. He's able to communicate. I was on Facebook Messenger with him. I don't want to tax him too much, so I told him, when you're ready to talk, get a hold of me. And we chatted that way today, and he was, his usual, irascible self. He's got a infection going on. They need to clear up, but the infection is not with the liver. So the liver is doing fantastic. He's just on a long, slow road to recovery.
Yeah,
that's right. Well, he's always in our prayers, of course. And we hope he's in yours as well, listeners.
Thanks for being with us here every week at Snakes and Otters, a pointless discussion of eternal questions. Be sure to spread the word on your social media accounts. Follow us and retweet us. We are on Instagram and on Twitter at Snakes and Otters.
Let your friends know that they can find us on Podbean, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, and on YouTube. Just search Snakes and Otters Podcast to find us, and please remember to leave us your comments and reviews. It helps people find us.
And you can always send us an email at snakesandotterspodcast@gmail.com.
I'm Martin.
I'm Robert.
And I'm Francis. Catch us next week. Same snake time, same otter channel.